Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're presented by The Athletic and CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program, Cole Zwicker, on for his weekly appearance. I'm glad that you haven't decided to abandon me after only 1 week. It is nice to know that I did not scare you off the first week.
Oh, yeah, man. No, it's a lot of fun. I'm amped to talk to some young NBA guys today, trying to watch as much NBA as possible before college kicks up, and then watching all of this becomes impractical. So, see how it goes.
So, it just gets crazy. Once college basketball season kicks in for me, I would say I genuinely probably spend 6 hours a day to 8 hours a day watching basketball. And I have to do so much of it the next day because it's impractical for me to watch games with commercials and with halftime and stuff like that. You know what I mean? You just have to go with the synergy cuts or any sort of online medium that you use.
Oh, yeah. I try to DVR 3 or 4 games and watch it that way. I can stream through them in about an hour and 20 minutes or so. And then a lot of the other stuff is via synergy. You just can't get to all of it. Even the NBA stuff right now with just that going on, you can't get to 8 games in total. There's just no way, even if you break it up into 2 separate days. Yeah,
there are a couple people that we were asked to talk about. And for those of you who were not following me on Twitter earlier or whatever, the 2 things that we are going to break down today on this podcast are going to be just some young standout NBA performances throughout the first week and a half of the year, week and a half of the year. And then the other thing we're going to talk about are combo guards, as we promised last week in the NBA draft. And, someone asked about Jamal Murray and maybe a couple other guys that I can't really think of at the top of my head. And I'm just shit, I haven't watched any Nuggets games this year. And the Nuggets were a team I was super interested in coming into the year. I'm fascinated to see how that entire thing works. I want to know how, having, essentially a lead guard scorer with Jamal Murray kind of works. And, if Emmanuel Mudiay is going well and, all of the passing from the front court with Paul Millsap and Nikola Jokic. I just haven't gotten a chance to watch a ton of them yet.
Yeah, luckily I recorded that game last night, I believe, against the Wizards and watched it earlier this morning. So I got an okay sense on the Nuggets. I saw one of their games before as well. So they're just somebody you have to watch if you're going to commit to watching basketball because I just love Jokic so much. But definitely more of a challenge than you'd think, integrating all these different pieces. Maybe it wasn't completely unforeseeable with the Millsap and trying to manage both Murray and Mudiay with both of them not playing at the highest of levels yet, but still a really intriguing team.
So, yeah, there's just so much talent around the league right now, but I feel like one team that a lot of people are particularly interested in is Philadelphia, right? So let's just kind of start there with the 76ers, given the fact that, they've had so many number 1 overall picks or number 3 or top 5 overall picks over the course of the last 4 years that they have now just built up this incredible amount of talent on their roster. And the guy that I want to start with is Ben Simmons. We'll get to Fultz in a minute, but I think that it's a disservice to Ben Simmons to not start there. He's been so categorically awesome thus far that in any normal year where there weren't 45 stars that had traded teams, plus, all of these awesome rookies, plus the Lonzo Ball factor, plus the fact that he has this big story and Markelle Fultz also on his team. If all of that didn't happen and this was a normal basketball season, Ben Simmons would be a national story right now, I think. Ben Simmons has been unbelievable. For those, kind of following from a distance, he's averaged 17 points, 10.8 rebounds, 7 assists. He's shooting about 50% from the field. Obviously not really making a ton of jump shots, but he hasn't needed it yet, is the crazy thing. What are your initial impressions of what you've seen from Ben Simmons?
His game last night against the Pistons was just phenomenal.
Unbelievable.
On both sides of the floor, not just offense, but defense as well. His footwork, his balance, just the angles he took, everything was really positive. And offensively, he doesn't need a jump shot right now because they're playing that 4-5 pick and roll with Embiid. He's playing off of Embiid. They're establishing some connection. Embiid started slipping picks earlier last night, and so Simmons was hitting him on a couple of those. Mm-hmm. I think Simmons' versatility goes underlooked. Just the fact that he can post, you can play a 4 out, and then Simmons inside, Embiid can space from the top of the key, and he can post and seal mismatches. He's really heady. He made a lot of high intelligence plays. The first play of the game, the sequence was it just blows your mind. His just understanding of basketball is really high. He does not look like a rookie. That's my biggest takeaway from him is there's no way if you never were affiliated or familiar with him before that you'd think that guy is a 21-year-old rookie. He just looks way beyond his years.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's not even just like the assists. Like, the fact that he's averaging 7 assists a game is bananas, but it's the fact that he's also like making these ridiculous hockey passes. He's been unselfish. The ball doesn't stick with him in the same way that it stuck with him at Louisiana State, right? Like he always was just he was their everything at LSU, and he was counted on to do so much, and obviously he put up really good assist numbers there too, but I'm impressed with the unselfishness thus far, as well as just the unbelievable versatility in his game, as you had mentioned. Like, the defense has been pretty solid so far. He's been switchable in a useful way. They've been able to kind of operate mildly aggressive defensive schemes due to his ability to kind of recover onto bigger players or smaller players. In terms of his offensive game without the jump shot, it hasn't really been an issue yet because they're playing him with such strong floor spacing, right? Like, Joel Embiid can step out and is a weapon that has to be guarded out there. Robert Covington has to be guarded out there. Jared Bayless is a good shooter. JJ Redick's obviously one of the best shooters who's ever lived. That's basically the lineup. They're playing him with some other guys occasionally, like Fultz will get in on the action occasionally. Saric will get in on the action occasionally. But for the most part, it's those 5. That's the starting lineup right now, and that's what Simmons is playing with. And the amount of spacing has really opened up the floor for him in a way that's conducive to his game, and he's had no issue getting to the rim and scoring at the basket. He's been really fluid in the way that he attacks. One dribble, drive, put your shoulder down and get to the basket, finishing with both hands. The finish with the left hand, I think, has actually been really good so far compared to what it was in college, where he would mostly finish with his right hand. Really, overall, there's not a whole lot to nitpick here. He's just been awesome so far. Like, he looks like one of the 60 or so best players in the NBA after just 4 games.
It's just been really impressive that he's still been able to get to his spots, even with guys sagging off. Like, you watch them against the Wizards, Oubre would duck under screens, and Simmons would still beat him to the corner. And that kind of stuff is really impressive. If I'm gonna nitpick about anything, it's the finishing for me. I would like him to be a little bit more physical and play up to his size. He does kind of stop short at the rim at times. He has poor instincts as far as taking these off-balance floaters with his right. We saw that in college. It's not ideal. I don't think it's necessarily flag-worthy, but if he wants to be a superstar caliber player, I don't even think he needs to shoot. I think he has to finish well. I think that's the key. We've seen that with Giannis. He's not going to finish as well as Giannis with that length extension probably, but he has to improve in that area. If he does that, he just does too many other things at an elite level. His understanding of the game is elite. Like, again, I was mentioning the first play of the game where he understood an entry pass angle, passed that to his teammate, realized the shot clock was weighing down, threw up a floater, and then he got his own rebound, tipped it right to Embiid, who got the layup. It's just all that was on display in one play. That's the kind of basketball acumen we're talking about here. Yeah,
he's really just ridiculous. But on the other side of the coin for the 76ers has been Markelle Fultz, and I don't even know how to evaluate him thus far because of the shooting stuff. So for people, again, who have not been paying attention, Markelle Fultz is using an entirely different shooting motion from what he used at Washington. Now, there have been some reports out there about the fact that his shoulder is injured right now. There was a statement from Raymond Brothers, his agent, released to Adrian Wojnarowski earlier today at ESPN saying, like, he had fluid drain from his right shoulder, can't really raise his arms far enough above his head to where he can shoot it in the same manner that he used to shoot it, I guess is the explanation. In terms of the other stuff, he's getting to his spots in the same exact manner. He's having no issues getting into the paint. He's making really, really good. He's making smart passes. He's making creative plays. But this is kind of a great example of, in today's NBA, if you're going to be a scorer, you really need to have the threat of a jump shot. And the fact that he doesn't have that threat right now is just hampering him and his team in such a significant manner that I don't really think it's worth him playing right now even. Like, I don't think he's going to develop bad habits, but I feel like we're not really learning anything about him in terms of what he's capable of even.
No, you took away his biggest strength. I mean, you can argue his handle and his shake is what makes him special, but without the jump shot, that doesn't matter as much because guys just sag off and he can't do as much on the floor. So I don't get why you'd risk. I don't know if you're risking further injury. I'm guessing they're not because otherwise he wouldn't be out there. That's the only rational explanation.
Sure.
But he's not playing in full form. If you've never seen Fultz before, this is not Markelle Fultz. This is nothing resembling Markelle Fultz. I mean, you can see kind of the craft with the passing, the spin moves, the ability to get into the lane, but without the threat of the pull-up, he was a dynamic off-the-dribble shooter at UW. That was his thing. He could hit that scheme-changing three. He could work himself in as a three-level scorer, and you just haven't seen any of that. He can't even finish very well because of his shoulder. He was never a high-level finisher. I was higher on it than the percentages were, but he still hasn't been himself in that regard. So I think the only feasible option moving forward is to just rest this guy, let him get healthy. I'm not sure if he's going to develop any bad habits. I wouldn't risk it. I don't think it's worth risking considering they just redshirted 2 previous number 1 picks. I'm not saying redshirt him necessarily, but just let him recalibrate, come back from this injury, and actually show us the full form rather than risk any potential further damage to this.
Yeah, and I mean, at a certain point, I think you also risk damaging his confidence.
Yep.
It's basketball at that level is such a game of knowing what you can do that even the smallest amount of doubt, even the smallest shred of, am I certain that I can do this at the level that is expected of me, it can come into play and really cause you issues as a guy. So I'm rooting for Fultz to become what I think he's capable of. And I am also hoping that at some point now, I genuinely believe they should sit him and just kind of let this thing play out and, hopefully the shoulder gets healthy here going forward. Is there anything else with the 76ers we want to talk about before we move on? Because, I guess we could talk about Embiid, but he's been basically what we expected, right? There hasn't been any surprise there. He isn't shooting well, but whatever, I guess. I'm not super worried about that. I will say that the game that Okafor played, I didn't think he was awful. I thought he was kind of useful in that game. He had 10 and 9, but he hasn't played outside of that game. Covington's been really good. Covington looks like a $20 million a year player. But beyond that, I don't really know that there's much else from me.
Yeah, I think a couple of guys have noted that Embiid looks a little bit overweight, not necessarily in a bad weight, but just he got too strong and it's impacted his mobility a little bit. I've seen that. He struggled a little bit more pick and roll defense to start the year. You still see the range, but he's not moving quite as well laterally. He's not quite as light of foot. But I don't think it's anything to really be concerned about. Embiid's going to be Embiid. Maybe he's just getting back into better shape over time. So I'm not worried about him. Covington's been really awesome. He's getting better looks playing with Simmons. You're going to see that 3-point percentage, I think, escalate to from where it's been in the past. I think he's going to start becoming a proficient off the catch shooter, and his defense it's always been underrated. The functional strength, the length, the instincts. He's a great player for them, and they need to renegotiate and extend him come up on November 15th. I think they got to try to do that for the time value of money now, being the argument of keeping him off the market because he's a huge piece for them.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And he fits so well with Ben Simmons, I think. That's not the guy you want to let go. If it ends up being that you end up getting rid of J.J. Redick, even though J.J., I think, is a really great fit with Ben Simmons as well, I think you keep Covington over Redick at this stage, just given where they are in their careers.
I agree.
Let's move on. Let's talk about Andrew Wiggins. If I remember correctly from talking with you just over the years, you're lower on Andrew Wiggins than I am generally. That's right?
Yeah, correct. I'm a little bit more skeptical, but I'm not as low as some other people are as far as him. I see the upside. I just think before this year and even into this year, it's been more kind of theoretical than realized on the floor.
Right. So, you're someone who thinks he might make an all-star game at some point. I'm someone who thinks he's going to be a multi-time all-star.
Correct.
So Wiggins this year, I think, has been awesome. I think that the biggest key to what we've seen from Wiggins so far, and I'll just read off numbers here, 25 points a game, 6 rebounds a game, a little bit under 2 assists a game. Defensive impact has been Wigginsy, I would say, but we'll get to that in a second. The biggest key to his game, though, has been the jump shooting. He's nearly doubled his 3-point attempt per game output. Currently, he's hitting at 42%. Obviously, I'll be surprised if that ends up holding up over the course of an entire calendar year. But at the same time, the jump shot for me has always been the key to opening up the rest of his game. And I know how hard he works at it in the offseason from talking with Drew Hanlon and, the guys that he works out with. this is something that's been such a key to getting him to that next level that he knows he needs to bring around. And it seems like that hard work is coming to fruition now. Where are you at with what you've seen from Andrew Wiggins right now?
Well, the jump shooting confidence is there. He's getting up attempts at a high rate from three, and all the off-ball stuff. I mean, in that offense, it's really imperative for him to be able to shoot and space the floor, dealing with Towns and Butler, and he looks proficient there. Actually, the most impressive part for me has been some cutting he's done. He's got some really high-level cuts, realizing gaps in the defense, exploding. I mean, he's got freakish athleticism, run and jump. I mean, he's going to be able to finish in those areas. So if he shows the intellect, that's really impressive stuff. And the rebounding, too. I mean, he's functionally applying his athleticism in more ways now. I mean, he's on the glass. He's increased his defensive rebounding rate. You see him on offensive rebounds, too, crashing down from the perimeter. If he can do little things like that and make the winning plays along with space the floor, then you really have something if he gets to a reasonable level of defense, which is the next step.
So let's go there next. What have you thought of Andrew Wiggins' defense thus far?
Well, I think the one personifying play was against Utah where Favors had the ball in the post in that mismatch against Butler, skipped it to the other side of the floor to Rubio. Wiggins left Joe Ingles in the corner to take Rubio. Then it was a quick pass to Ingles in the corner. Of course, buries the three because Ingles doesn't miss open threes. And, Tibbs was just irate at Wiggins for making that choice. So I think that kind of personifies it for me. I felt kind of bad in the Spurs game. He got taken advantage of a little bit because the Spurs do some weak side action stuff. They'll set a down screen. Actually, I think that was the first play of the game on a Jeff Teague drive. They ran some weak side action. Wiggins was looking the wrong way and was late to react. So stuff like that. He's got to iron out the off ball, the rotations, just the IQ stuff. He has the physical gifts, of course, to defend on ball. He's quick. He's long. He's athletic. It's just putting it all together. And that's easier said than done. I mean, a lot of people say, you can just add off ball defense, add instincts. That's a tough sell, but he could get there.
So I agree with everything you've said in terms of the off-ball defense. It's been a concern in terms of the way he rotates for a long time, and I think that we're still seeing a lot of the same bullshit come up, right? I think that from what I have seen, at least, he's been much more adept at guarding on ball now because he is not forced to guard the toughest guy as often so far this year. Jimmy Butler's been getting tougher assignments than him, I would say, for the most part. They'll occasionally end up tossing Wiggins on someone if he's a little bit more athletic. But he's been a little bit better than what I would say I expected on ball.
Oh, yeah. He has been drawing lesser assignments. I think against the Spurs, he was defending Kyle Anderson. That just gives him a better kind of platform to improve just the positioning stuff. He's not having to worry about, getting boat raced every time,
Yep.
He's got a good reactionary first step. I'm not really worried about that. It's more of like, is he consistently engaged? That's the problem with him. I think it's mostly mental, or most all mental. If he can figure that stuff out on and off ball, Jimmy Butler's going to help him a lot. I think that he can only help him as far as approach and holding him accountable. Hopefully Tibbs can do that too over time. So I'm really interested to see. It's a nice test case. I kind of feel the same thing about Jaylen Brown, even though I do feel like Brown has better natural instincts defensively. He's a little bit more intense. So they're interesting trial cases for me.
Well, where do you want to go from here? I sent you a big list of names. Do you want to talk about Jaylen Brown real quick? Obviously I think there's a lot of excitement about Jaylen. He's been I'd say maybe a little bit better than what I expected, especially that first game against Cleveland. 20 points. He played okay defense. As much as anyone can play solid defense against that team. What have been your overall takes on Jaylen Brown?
I mean, the first two games are a murderer's row for him with playing LeBron and Giannis. It doesn't get any harder than that. So it's hard to assess his individual defense because he's just not going to stop either one of those guys because basically nobody can but maybe Kawhi. So that's an unfair assessment to kind of draw many takeaways there. I thought he's been mostly as advertised. I mean, he's dynamic in transition. He looks fluid with his footwork. His athleticism there really shines. In the half court, it just comes down to can he make open catch and shoot shots. And it's just, I feel like kind of the takeaways with him, every time he does something because he's so athletic, people just overreact to the very positive extreme. Like people on Twitter, oh my God, he looked like a future all-star in this game. And I'll watch the tape and I'll be like, he made plays in transition. He had like one pull-up jumper, but mostly everything was, just in some kind of an advantage situation. It's not a bad thing. I don't know how that translates to being a star unless he's like a star shooter. and he doesn't really profile as that kind of guy. So I think ideally he's a 3-and-D kind of player. He definitely has a ton of versatility on ball, defensively, off ball. I still have my questions, but I don't see any reason why Boston fans should feel anything but optimism. Maybe not the optimism to the degree that they're feeling, but just being positive on the player. I understand that completely.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think, would you agree that more people are more excited about his defense than his offense?
I think so, yeah. I think that's fair.
So this year, the Celtics, it's such a small sample size, but they've been 7 points better offensively and 5 points or 4 points worse defensively with him on the floor. Like, I don't really know what exactly that says. Maybe it says that, he's gotten all these difficult matchups and he's the one that takes them. So obviously you're just going to be worse in that scenario. But I think the offense is really interesting because he has played a lot of minutes with Kyrie Irving, but Kyrie's offensive rating right now is 96 and his is 104 in terms of, when they're on the floor. So he's not been, I think, as harmful to offense due to his jump shooting as I think I anticipated coming into the year.
He's another guy that has improved his cutting. I mean, he got LeBron a couple times on that first night, and that's a really great avenue for him to succeed if he's making timely cuts in that offense with how the ball moves on the perimeter in Boston's system. If he's making those baseline cuts and realizing when a defender turns his head to dart in, that's a huge avenue for him to get 4 cheap points a game. I mean, not necessarily cheap because they're valuable, but you know what I mean? Like in an advanced situation. Yeah, so that's a big development for him, kind of the same way I've seen for Wiggins. So that's a positive.
Yeah, 100% agreed there. Let's move on and talk about Kelly Oubre because I've really liked what I've seen from Kelly this year. Right around 11 points a game, 6 rebounds, playing 35 minutes a game. He's definitely like the 4th or 5th option in Washington, but he's developed to the point where I think he's a legitimate NBA starter now. And that's really, really valuable for a team who has as much depth issues as they do, that they can get 35 minutes out of him right now is really, really valuable.
That team just really works as far as their setup now. They've built it in a way that actually optimizes basically everybody on the team. They have Otto Porter, Beal coming off these pin-down curls. Both are really adept shooters. And then you have Oubre, who basically is a corner three-point shooter in their offense. That's how he's utilized, and that's fun.
Cutter, yeah.
Yeah, and cutter. Exactly. He's kind of that 3-and-D, your typical 3-and-D guy, but he has more athleticism and he has that great length around the rim. Sometimes he'll hit like a pull-up jumper, but for the most part, he's spotting up in the corner and he's crashing down on the offensive glass. He did a really good job of that against the Sixers in their first game. And yeah, the length is just ridiculous with him. We can get into defense a little bit, but he had a play yesterday where he switched on to Paul Millsap and just straight up blocked a shot in a face-up situation, which you don't see very often against NBA caliber fours. That's how long he is. So he really has stuck out on both ends, provided some weak side rim protection as well.
Yeah, and I like the fact that they're not just using him as a corner cutter, they're using him as a corner crasher for offensive rebounds too, where his length can kind of wreak havoc as well. That's really useful to me. Defensively, go ahead. You said you wanted to mention a couple things.
Oh yeah, I just think that his length is noticeable as hell on court. I mean, every time he's on the court, you notice his long arms. Again, blocking Millsap is no small feat in a face-up setting. He can switch. I'm not sure if his positioning's great yet, but he's quick enough and long enough where he can erase some of those mental gaps. And off ball, he's been okay. He's made a couple of really nice rotations from the weak side, covered up some rim protection situations. So that's promising to see. I think he, like you noted, he seems like kind of his role is solidified in what he does on the floor, and that's a really, really valuable role on a team that doesn't have any depth, really. I mean, especially with Markieff Morris out, they have basically five starting caliber players, but beyond that, there's a huge drop-off. So when you get Markieff back, then you have a solid top 6. That's a really, really great team at the top.
Yeah, I agree with that. Who do you want to move to next?
Do you want to do D'Angelo?
Yeah. Let's talk about D'Angelo. I want to take some D'Angelo victory laps already. Like we're what? I think they played 4 games. I've watched 2 of them. That dude is a stud. They've played 3 games. I'm sorry. Dude is an absolute stud. He's averaging 21 points and 7 assists. I said 20 and 7 coming into the year. I think that's going to be about what he does this year. I've seen no reason to think that he's going to be anything that less than like a borderline all-star in the Eastern Conference this year. Like, he has been a monster in the pick and roll. Their spaced offense, as I kind of talked about early in the year, or in the preseason, the way that they have shooters surrounding him and the way that Kenny Atkinson's offense works was going to really help him in comparison to the way the Lakers' offense ran, where they had absolutely zero floor spacing around him. It's really opened up his mid-range game. He can knock down shots from the elbow, as we know so well. It's helped him become a better finisher at the rim, particularly. That's probably been the biggest leap that I've seen from him thus far. He's actually hitting more shots at the rim, it seems like, after that was a major, major weakness early in his career. He's just a monster. He's an absolute stud offensively in the way that we expected him to be coming into his career in the NBA.
I think that Brooklyn's tempo is really doing him a lot of favors, getting him more on the move. He doesn't have a great first step. He's not dynamic in that fashion, but when you get him with a head of steam, I think he's actually got decent burst. I mean, it's not great, but he can get to the rim, like you were saying. The finishing via floaters, some craft. I mean, I've even seen some straight line drives that just looked a lot faster than they did in LA. It's great to see. It's all going to come down, maybe not all, but most of it's going to come down to his pull-up jumper. This year, he's 9 of 19 off the dribble. That's a huge development for him if he can be efficient at that. He was pretty good last year, but I think he can still go to the next level. He was an elite off-the-dribble shooter coming out of Ohio State. If he can reach that in the NBA, I think there's a ton of stuff to work with. I never really bought the whole, this guy isn't a natural point guard talk. I mean, he's a score-first guy, but his vision is great. It's always been the decision-making that's kind of held him back a little bit. He made some knucklehead passes in L.A., but that guy has great vision in pick and roll. Like, he can manipulate you with the ball, make skip passes. He's a crafty passer. So offensively, I don't have really any reservations with him. If he can finish okay at the rim, even defensively, I thought he looked more engaged. That size and his length, he's using those. He's never going to have the plus foot speed at the point of attack, but he can at least play two positions and be a non-liability potentially in time. And it seems like he's working hard on that. I see a higher effort level with him.
Yeah, it just seems like he's generally more engaged in Brooklyn. And, I do think that part of it is that system makes you on the move a little bit more. It just kind of gets you more engaged. It's kind of like the theory that good friend of the program, Daniel LaRue, has, where teams that switch more on defense tend to be better on defense because they keep their players more engaged with the game generally. I think that some of that is happening with D'Angelo Russell a little bit. And, I'll be honest, like I'm not as high on him as I kind of talked about in this. I was more just kind of joking within a victory lap. Like, he still has turnover issues. He still has decision-making issues. Maybe the finishing isn't quite as good as what we have seen thus far, and he takes a small step back that way. I do think, though, that generally, even if he plays to a small level below this, he's still going to be a borderline all-star level player just because, he is that gifted as a shot maker and as a shot creator for others. And
he can play off the ball. If you're talking about a team-building exercise, he's really always been adept as a catch-and-shoot player. He can actually cut really well. He's got a good IQ as far as that goes. So if you're looking at building around him, and you can acquire a second star, and he can definitely play off the ball. He's not going to be the number one player in our title team, of course. But if he's an all-star caliber player, I mean, that's an allure for that market. And he's definitely conducive with other players. So I don't see him as some superstar, but he's definitely worth a lot more than what the Lakers got in that trade. Again, I just thought that was ridiculous, and I think that's kind of manifested with how he's played in Brooklyn.
Hey, they really nailed that pick, though, at least.
They did.
The guy that I think has surprised me a little bit more than I expected, which really shouldn't come as a surprise, given who he plays for, is Dejounte Murray. I guess that at some point I should just be like, oh, this dude plays for the Spurs. It's going to be fine. Like, he's going to be awesome. I had some pretty significant questions in terms of his decision-making, his shot-making. The burst generally from him coming out of college. I thought he was a little bit more of a long athlete who got to his spots just by that virtue as opposed to having the lightning-quick first step that a lot of guys do. So far this year, he has proven a lot of that just wrong. He is averaging 13 points, like 10 rebounds, which is unsustainable, but who cares? 5 assists. The team has been awesome with him on the floor. Like so much better with him on the floor. Again, small sample size, 80 minutes he's played this year of their 144, but their overall offensive rating is 99.8. His offensive rating is 109.8 on the floor. Defensive rating is 92.3. His defensive rating is 89.5. Some of that, again, comes with playing with starters, obviously. It's much easier to play with a guy like LaMarcus Aldridge than it is a guy like Kyle Anderson consistently. But you know what? It's working for Dejounte Murray, and I think that his ability to create plays within the flow of that offense, something that, again, was a question coming out of Washington, has been really, really, really good so far.
I think that biggest takeaway for me is that he looks the polar opposite of what he did in Summer League, which was horrendous. I thought he was a disaster in Summer League, and I was legitimately worried. And he looks like an NBA player again. He kind of abused Jeff Teague on that opening night. A lot of that was, I think, the Timberwolves' kind of defensive deficiencies as far as acclimating in a team concept. Teague made a ton of mistakes in that game defensively. Yeah. Got benched, I think. But yeah, I mean, his handle is really good. He's got decent burst. His finishing acumen is basically his floater, but he has really good touch on his floater. Just comes down to, how well does he shoot the ball? We'll kind of see over time. I'm not going to make any grandiose conclusions on this small sample just because there is such a checkered past with him. He wasn't as high profile as a guy like D'Angelo, of course. So he has a lot of questions to answer still, but yeah, I'm higher on him than I was in Summer League, so that's a start.
Yeah, the floater is going to be key for him. He doesn't have that, electric leaping ability that a lot of people do at the point guard position, obviously. What I will say that has impressed me more than any of it, though, from what I've seen so far this season, he used to make a lot of really boneheaded decisions at Washington. A lot of, why are you passing that ball? Already it seems like Greg Popovich and that coaching staff have kind of gotten through to him in that manner, and they've limited the bad decisions relatively, at least. I think he's got just about a 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio so far. If they can continue that, I think that he is definitely a solid NBA player who can be a good rotation player at least. I'm not 100% convinced of him being a consistent NBA starter yet, but I think that he's shown enough to where I'm a lot more convinced that he's definitely a solid NBA player than I was kind of coming into the year.
I think that's fair. It's going to take a little bit of a bigger sample for me to buy in, even on the rotation part, but he does look it in the first couple of games. I can't take that away from him. Have you seen any of OG Anunoby yet?
A little bit. The offensive fluidity has been impressive to me.
Yes.
He was a guy that was falling on my board even before he got hurt at Indiana because the offense just hadn't come along. He still didn't look comfortable handling the basketball. The jump shot had obviously fallen a little bit from where it was as a freshman. The low release point scared me a little bit. But so far with Toronto, it's been really interesting to see how good his feet are in terms of handling the ball. His footwork handling the ball is really good. He's solid at attacking off of very aggressive closeouts. He has been a little bit more shifty than I expected. I am a lot more impressed with him than I expected to be on the offensive end.
Yeah, I'll echo all of that. I think that the fluidity as far as footwork, he had a play in the preseason against Detroit that I've never seen him make before as far as a ball handle, changed directions twice, showed the footwork under the rim and the patience. He had an up and under finish, and it was who the hell is this guy? Some people were tweeting that can't be OG Anunoby because it looked nothing like what we saw at Indiana. And he showed some passing flashes there on attacking closeouts, kind of the drop-off passes. So the passing stuff hasn't surprised me as much, even though it still has been nice to see, and it was probably more than what I expected. If he can dribble at all, though, and kind of fluidly create for himself, I don't think he's ever going to have a pull-up jumper. That just doesn't seem like it's in his realm of outcomes. But again, I didn't think he could dribble like this in traffic, make decisions on the move. He can do this stuff. I think Toronto got an absolute steal, and I was already high on him. I think I had him number 10 in my draft, even with all these on my board, even with all these concerns, and I could have been low on him.
Yeah. So one thing that's worth noting is that the jump shot still has not come around at all yet. To him making a significant offensive impact, he's going to need to be able to shoot the ball at some point. The passing, as you mentioned, has been really, really good. In terms of getting him comfortable, I think I've loved what Toronto has done, kind of embracing his quiet tendency right? Like, I think that guys like him who tend not to be, super, super engaging, super, super open, you have to find the right way to foster their personalities. And I really like what Toronto has done in, doing just like little videos saying like, all of these analytic numbers like flash on the screen. He goes, we play the Bulls on Thursday.
Those are great.
Like that's all they do. It's really, I think it's a great way to get him comfortable, despite maybe being a guy that I don't know if he's super open getting comfortable like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I did not consider that. The videos were pretty awesome, though. Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on, of course. To have the high-level outcome, you need the shooting. You need at least off the catch. That's all he needs. He doesn't really need it off the dribble. He just has to be able to shoot a spot-up three, even from the corners. If he can do that proficiently, he's going to defend. I mean, we've seen the defense. He's so strong. Like, Ben Simmons dropped his shoulder into OG and didn't even move him when they played. Like, that's how strong this dude is. And he's long, too. So, he can defend basically every position, but some fives. And maybe some elite-level athlete lead guards. But
yeah, I think he's going to be able to defend fives fine. Like, by the time he's, 24, I think he's going to be able to defend fives.
I think that's fair. I think I'm just thinking about Embiid as a prototype, but maybe he can defend even Embiid. I don't know. But he definitely a ton of defensive versatility there. If he shoots, dynamic two-way player. Yeah, no,
I've been surprised with how good he's been. Like, I was thinking he was going to need a year, especially coming off of the injury. I was thinking, maybe he would make an impact year 2, but he's been really, really good year 1, just immediately. Like, that has been one of the bigger rookie surprises to me, honestly. Like, can you think of any other rookie surprises that you've seen thus far?
Well, the two main ones that stick out, of course, are Kuzma and John Collins. So those are the two guys for me. Collins.
Yeah, you weren't high on Collins, though.
I was not. No. He surprised me just with his rebounding instincts. His athleticism was pretty obvious, but the way Atlanta's using him, again, Budenholzer's really smart. Spread pick and roll. Him as the finishing dive big. He's been awesome there. He's beat guys to the glass because he dives so hard. So him and Kuzma's been the most impressive to me as far as the lower level guys. I just think what we've seen in Summer League and the preseason has translated as far as his fluid athleticism, spin moves, passing on the move, instincts on skip passes, all these different components of his game. It's not just the shooting. Like, he regressed in the preseason as a shooter, and he was still making plays that were winning plays. I think that he can play the 4. He's probably their best 4 option right now, honestly, because Lonzo needs that spacing. He needs that ability to score that Randall can't provide. If they play Randall at the 5 and Kuzma at the 4, those lineups, I think, will be really interesting for them offensively.
You know who's been kind of sneaky under the radar, in the couple games that I've seen now with Brooklyn, is Jared Allen. I didn't think he would be all that playable this year. Just, he's a guy that I thought would take a year again to kind of figure things out on the NBA level. He's been really good. He's been really, really good in the minutes that I've seen so far. Really great hands. He can play as a pick and roll diver. He can kind of short roll as well, which is really useful in NBA schemes. I've liked what I've seen from Allen as well. It's not anything crazy, you know what I mean? He hasn't been incredible, but their defense has also improved when he's been on the floor too. And I don't know that that is something you expect from rookie centers, that, even in small samples like this, especially whenever you're playing behind a guy like Tim Mozgov, that the Nets defense, it does look markedly better when he's on the floor.
I definitely did not expect a year 1 contribution from him. I thought this was going to be a multi-year, kind of phase him into the process, get him acclimated with the NBA defense. And every time you turn it up,
he's played 30 to 40 minutes probably.
Yeah, for sure. We're not making any grandiose takeaways from it, but just he looks better than I thought he would immediately on the floor. Every time you turn on a Nets game and he's in the game, he's doing something, especially finishing around the rim. You see the length, first and foremost, stands out, just the size and length combination. He could be something.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk a lot about John Collins just because I was in on John Collins. I expected this from John Collins. He's produced at every level per minute, and I think that was just going to happen with Collins. I've liked De'Aaron Fox. I'll say that. De'Aaron Fox has been really, really impressive. 13.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists. They've weirdly looked a lot better, again, when he's been in the game versus when he's been out of the game, in my opinion. So Yeah, I like what I've seen from Fox as well.
Yeah, I've been really curious. I follow just his output in the pick and roll because I like to see how teams defend him. You saw the Mavericks who went under every time. Fox didn't get to the rim once in the half court. They also played some matchup zone, so there's a lot of high-low reads. He would hit Scal in the mid-post area for shots. And then you see Phoenix do the same thing. But these teams that aren't doing that, if they're extending too far on the perimeter, he's going to blow by absolutely everybody. If you press up on him, he's going to beat you. But somebody on Twitter earlier asked a question about his finishing through contact because I had an issue with that coming to the draft. That was one of my negatives with him, just with how light he is. Can he actually sustain these blows with NBA rim protection, finish through contact? He did have some really good flashes against the Nuggets. He ran through Will Barton twice. Not the biggest frame or anything like that, but it was just good to see him hold his balance. He got Millsap once as well, but for the most part, it's been against guards like that. Demetrius Jackson, I still think his balance looks a little shaky when he actually gets contested by true bigs like Kenneth Faried, Tyson Chandler, Clint Capella. All those were just kind of rickety, got knocked off his spots. It didn't look like he could finish and absorb contact like bigger guys can, like a Dennis Smith, for example. But this guy he's been great. I mean, he's lightning quick. He's the fastest player, maybe with John Wall, in the NBA already. You just cannot stay in front of this guy in space. It just comes down to that pull-up jumper, and he's been okay. I think he's 6 of 18 so far in the half court off the dribble, which isn't great, but his makes do look pretty good. It's just, can he build on that in time? It's hard to become, again, an elite mid-range shooter. It just rarely happens for people, and that's what he's going to need to be like a plus offensive player, in my opinion. We'll see how it goes. He hasn't taken a lot of threes yet. He has made a couple, one off the catch in the corner that looked pretty fluid. So, yeah, I'm definitely more impressed with him than I was. He's translated. His athleticism is just so dynamic in the open floor.
I will just say the numbers very strongly disagreed with you in terms of what he was at the rim. I think he was in the 80th percentile of all college basketball players at the rim last year.
Oh, I know.
He was good at the rim last year.
Yeah, my issue was not with him as a finisher. When he gets there and he has space, he's dynamic. But my issue was him finishing over contact, specifically against Luke Cornett. He really struggled against that kind of NBA length, size. That was my only issue. I mean, he's clearly a really good finisher, and he can get there at a high volume. It's just, can he finish through these bigger guys, maintain balance? And I'm still a question on that. We'll see.
All right, the last guy we're going to talk about here before we move on to combo guards, Lonzo Ball. Everyone has very large takes on Lonzo Ball right now. He had the really, really poor game against Patrick Beverley, had the great game against the G League Suns team, had a very average game the next game. Where are you at with Lonzo Ball and how he has performed this year?
I think that third game is probably the one that draws the most of a semblance to what I think he's going to look like this season as far as contributing across the board, being great. He's been a great rebounder this year, really crashing the glass. That was a really big positive of him coming out, one of the best guard rebounders in recent memory. The passing has been there. His pick and roll comfort has been a little bit better than I thought. I mean, the thing with Lonzo is it's not all going to look good. Some of this stuff, like the pull-up game, is not going to look very fluid, the floater game, but he's showing at least signs of doing that. I don't put really much stock into the Suns game outside of a couple moves he did. He had this one really nice spin move. They got to his fadeaway jumper that looked nice. The Suns scheme was just literal bullshit. What they were doing is, there was no help. There was no rotations at all. If you watch the footage and some of the stuff I posted on Twitter, nobody's even rotating under the rim. It's you could drive a truck to the basket. And I'm not trying to demean what Lonzo did, but if you give anybody in the NBA a straight line drive to the rim uncontested, they're probably going to make it. So it was that ducking under screens by 5 or 6 feet. It's Lonzo can shoot, guys. It's not like he's a non-prolific shooter. He was a good catch-and-shoot shooter at UCLA, and if you just let him set his shot, it's basically a catch-and-shoot anyway. You have to contest. So, yeah, I think he is kind of who we thought he was. I mean, the extremes with him are going to be extreme just because of who he is, who his dad is, and that's unfortunate. But I think he's held his own. I mean, he's been the player that I thought he would be.
I will say that I have been surprised with how he has affected their on-off numbers so far. You would think, given the fact that he's been so productive, that he would have really, really helped their offense on the floor statistically, right? Mm-hmm. Their offense is actually 7 points worse per 100 possessions with him on the floor. The defense, obviously, they're worse with him on the floor because he doesn't know how to guard pick and rolls yet, doesn't really have great defensive fundamentals yet. Those will come in time, I think. I am surprised, though, with the fact that their true shooting percentage is 4 points worse so far with him on the floor than with him off the floor. Just like little stuff like that that's been a bit shocking to me. He was incredible against Phoenix. Like you had mentioned, Phoenix's, scheme was a disaster. Their effort from Eric Bledsoe and Tyson Chandler was a joke. But again, I don't think you can take anything away from him. He was just unbelievable in that game. He led them to that victory, in my opinion. But it's just a little bit weird to see the fact that, just statistically, he hasn't helped them yet, on the floor outside of that Phoenix game.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I know that New Orleans went on a huge run. The Lakers, went on a huge run with him out of the game. Clarkson blew up. They had this stint with Josh Hart in the game where they just went. I think Josh Hart ended up like a plus 20 or something ridiculous.
Hart was great that game.
Yeah. So they played really well in that stint. His defense, Lonzo's defense, has been a freaking disaster. I mean, point of attack, we knew that, but it's been even worse than I thought. I think he just gets boat raced pretty much every time down the floor. I thought the instincts off ball would show up a little bit more than they have. I haven't seen as much, anticipation in the passing lanes, rotating down even for block shots, which he was proficient at. So I'm still waiting for that, but he's a rookie. I mean, he hasn't blown a ton of rotations that I've seen horribly. So that'll come in time. But I think the defense, I'm a little bit lower on than I was before.
The craziest part of his statistical profile so far is that the Lakers have a 54.3 assist percentage as a team, but when he's on the floor, it's only 52.8. So their assist percentage is actually a little bit lower with him on the floor than when he's off the floor. For such a player that has just the infectious way of affecting his teammates in terms of sharing the basketball, I'm shocked that has been the case through 3 games. I would imagine that won't hold up over the course of those next even month for him. But I am overall, I kind of just went through a lot of statistical data saying he's not been good. I'm overall pretty positive on what I have seen from him thus far. And I feel like the only reason that is the case is that I think it's just very genuinely difficult for rookies. I think that, the 3-point shooting hasn't come along yet. He's been a good shooter at every level. I think that'll be fine. The finishing at the rim hasn't been all that great yet. I'm concerned about that a little bit more than I am the shooting so far. The free throw percentage, he's taking 2 free throws a game or whatever. It's not a big deal. But he's only hit 3 of 6 of his free throws so far. I'm just generally going to be very interested to see how the rest of this year goes. I don't know that I've seen a ton that makes me feel differently about Lonzo Ball. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And it bears mentioning that he's not getting a lot of easy offense through the offense. I mean, he's really creating in pick and roll with moderate efficiency. That was never really his game in college. I mean, he was more of an off-ball player as far as really awesome cutter, good spot-up shooter. He's not getting these high-efficiency looks yet. It's more he's playing heavy dose and pick and roll, same as Ingram. They're trying to see what these guys can do creation-wise, and it's going to lead to less efficiency. He's under 40% from the field. It's not that surprising when you take somebody who's played a certain style in a certain way and then integrate them into an NBA system, and he's basically running the show all the time. And I don't think he's not ready for that yet. I mean, you got to see what you have in him, but at the same time, you can't expect this plus efficiency from a guy who's never done it consistently as a self-creator.
Yep. All right, we're going to talk for 20 minutes about NBA draft combo guards. But before we do that, let's go on ahead and hear from our sponsor over at Greats. This episode is sponsored by Greats, makers of the all-time greats, classic, stylish, and comfortable sneakers sold at a great price. Greats is Brooklyn's first sneaker company. They sell all the greats, classic styles, made for the best, for less. There's a wide selection of men's and women's styles, versatile, suitable for any occasion. There are tons of different colors to choose from, materials. Their best sellers include the all-leather Royale lace-up, the Worcester slip-on. They've sent me the Royale lace-up. It is fantastic. It's a little bit more dressy necessarily than some of my sneakers, which is a good thing my girlfriend enjoys. You can check these out along with lots of other great styles at greats.com. And we have a special deal for our audience. Save 15% on your first order with our code GAMETHEORY. That's GAMETHEORY. Go to greats.com. That's GREATS.com. ats.com, and be sure to enter Game Theory to enter 15% at checkout. Greats also believes so much in their shoes. They offer a no-risk return and exchange policy to guarantee that you get the right fit in a style you love. That's greats.com, and use our code Game Theory to save 15%. Thanks to Greats for sponsoring the podcast. Let's talk about some combo guards, right, Cole?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
So last week we went through some lead guards. We're going to talk combo guards. I think there is a very clear number one combo guard here that I think we should spend a decent amount of time breaking down is Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown started the year with a little bit more off ball with Jaquan Newton. Jaquan Newton is a little wild in terms of his tendencies on the basketball floor. Brown showed a good ability to knock down shots off the catch. I believe he was like in the 80th percentile or so off the catch last year. And that kind of worked. Then Jaquan Newton gets suspended in February. Second straight year he'd been suspended. Brown steps into the lead guard role. And I think he performed pretty well as a pick-and-roll guard. He performed pretty well getting into the teeth of the defense, getting his teammates involved. I think he makes really good decisions. He's not necessarily a guy that's going to make the spectacular play, but I think he makes a lot of really, really smart, really, really good plays to keep the offense in track. So what are your impressions of Bruce Brown from the tape you've watched thus far?
The first thing that stands out for me is his physicality, his physical edge that he plays with. Just all of his combinations. I should probably
mention that real quick. So he's 6'5" with a 6'10" wingspan. Looks like Russell Westbrook in terms of like his physique.
Yeah, I mean, and he plays bigger. I think he's listed at 190 pounds. He plays bigger than that. I mean, he'll willfully switch on to bigger guys. He'll fight. Point of attack defense, really high on him there. He has a lot of defensive traits that you look for. I think he could get a little bit freelancer off the ball at times, but he profiles as a plus defender in the NBA. He has the athleticism, he has the strength, length, and the will too. I mean, that's the most important thing, is that physical will. Offensively, there's a lot of things. I agree with you. He's a proficient pick and roll passer, can make the simple reads. He's got a good enough handle, doesn't have a ton of shake, but he changes directions and speed pretty naturally for a secondary handler / combo guard type, can shift in and out of spaces. The issue, of course, that we arrived at last time briefly on the podcast is the pull-up jumper, which I don't know if you have numbers on, but it was really, really bad.
I believe 4 for 34 last year on jumpers off the dribble.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's a red flag that teams are just going to duck under him and pick and roll right there. And, again, that limits your high-value offensive options. So that's one area to look for improvement. But as a two-way, at least at worst, secondary handler type who can attack a bent defense in a secondary pick and roll, can attack closeouts with some dynamic athleticism. He has a lot of things going for him. I think that he is, it's rare to find a guy like this, a two-way player who's got a good basketball IQ, can pass, and who's going to defend it and put his body on the line. That just doesn't happen when you have that kind of work ethic as well. Yeah,
I think he's going to be an awesome secondary player on a basketball team. He strikes me as the perfect guy, assuming that the jump shooting off the catch stands up, to place next to a guard like a Stephen Curry, for instance, like a guy that, Steph is not going to be a great defender. You want to be able to hide him a little bit, but you want to place Brown next to a guard who can really shoot the basketball, I think. And a guy that might need some help as a secondary creator. Another guy that I think it might make a lot of sense to place him next to might be Alonzo Ball. I think would really, really help Lonzo Ball. I think it's kind of a similar situation to what the Lakers tried to do this offseason, signing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I think that there are actually some relative similarities there in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Bruce Brown, just in the way that they attack defensively. I think Brown probably has a bit more of a lead guard tendency than Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, but both are very, very strong at the point of attack defensively. Both are long. Both are tough and physical. I think that that's the kind of player you're looking at with Bruce Brown as opposed to a potential, superstar, lead guard.
Totally agree with that. And the ceiling depends on, of course, his catch and shoot ability. I haven't seen much of him shooting off movement, off screens. I'm not sure if that's in his game or not. He seems more of just a straight catch and shoot guy, which is workable. You can have that from the corners. He seems like he'll knock down open shots, and defenses have to respect him. So that's big. We should also note that he is old. Yep. I mean, for a sophomore, he'll be 22 if he comes out for the draft on opening night of the NBA season. So he is physically developed. He's more physically mature. So keep that in mind when you watch him at Miami. But at the same time, a lot of people don't ever grow into somebody that has his frame and tenacity. So he definitely has a really, really alluring package. I just don't necessarily see, again, this is why he's in the combo category and not the primary lead guard. He just doesn't have that natural ability to shoot off the dribble, the natural shake to create space for himself necessarily in non-ball screen situations. And the finishing is pretty good. He doesn't really have a left hand with any kind of touch, but he can explode off both one or two selectively. So there is some stuff to work with there. But again, I think that profile is more in like a secondary creation, attacking closeouts type of finish.
Speaking of Shake, let's move on to talk about Shake Milton real quick. Shake Milton is a really, really interesting one because he is such a high-level shooter. Like already, like Shake Milton is a damn good shooter. 42% from three as a freshman, 42% from three as a sophomore. I think he's at right around 300 attempts for his career. Again, obviously at 42%. 4.5 assists per game last year. He's a smart passer, but what I think that NBA teams worry about with him is the lack of burst. He's not like a crazy athlete necessarily, and he has a pretty skinny frame. He's like 6'5" with a 7-foot wingspan, but the frame isn't gonna lend itself to being like an incredible defender, despite the fact that I think he plays with a lot of tenacity on that end.
Yeah, the athleticism as far as lacking the first step burst, and you can see it especially finishing on the basket when he actually gets there. He's not a volume driver, but when he gets there, he doesn't have that explosion around the rim. But he's really proficient off the catch with the range. I mean, and situationally on pull-ups. Like, he can come off a pick and roll and pull up for, he can hit a three if a defense goes under. I think he can shoot off the dribble fine. And you're talking about a guy who can dribble well enough. He's functional enough to run a pick and roll. He can pass. He's got good IQ and decision making, and he can shoot both off the catch and off the bounce. That's a pretty rare package to find with a 6'6" guy with a 7-foot wingspan. I really do think he has a lot of positive qualities. I'm not sure, again, like you noted, how good his defense is going to be. He has pretty decent feet in space. He can move okay. He's not overly physical, but he's pretty good. I don't see him disrupt the ball. He doesn't really generate events as much off ball with his length. There's anticipation. But this is also somebody who's played in a motion scheme and a switching scheme in college. I think that's going to benefit him. Again, we talk about the values of switching. He's natural at that. So that communication, he's got a leg up on some of his competition there, being at SMU for multiple years in that setting. So if you pair together, shooting, defense potentially at an above average level, and decision making, he's a really good prospect.
Yeah, like, where are you going to have him, like, on a board right now? Because the more that I kind of consider his game, the more that I kind of think of him as a guy who I'm definitely going to have in my top 30.
Yeah, he's definitely in my top 30. I would say roughly right now in, like, the 18 to maybe 26, 27 range, just freeballing a little bit. I haven't made my board official yet, but that maybe in that range. But maybe towards the latter half of that, 25 or so, that seems reasonable. Yeah,
it's a really rare set of skills, like you said, to get a guy that you can rely on to be a secondary creator at 6'6" with a 7-foot wingspan, who can also be an elite jump shooter. Getting a guy like him makes building a roster much easier, in my opinion, because you can put so many different player types around him. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. He's really conducive to team building, and he doesn't even have to be a starting caliber player. Even if he's a rotation player, you can find minutes for someone like that because they are so conducive to acquiring a star in the future. You can draft this guy now and be like, he's not going to inhibit any kind of procedural process we go through with team building. I definitely think he's one of the easiest player types to fit on a team.
Yeah, he's a little bit reminiscent of the guy he played with last year in Shake Milton, right? Like, it's a little bit different because I think Shake is a little bit more, Sterling Brown last year. And I think it's a little bit different because Sterling Brown is a little bit more of a physical player, a little bit more of a physical defender. But that jump shooting combination along with defense is just so easy. It's why the 3-and-D archetype is what it is.
Exactly. That's why I was really high on Sterling Brown for the similar reasons that we're talking about with Shake.
Yeah, except that with Shake Milton, you add the ability to actually create off the bounce a little bit. It's a really useful player.
Yes.
Let's move on and talk about Devonte Graham. Did you by chance get to see any of the Missouri game this weekend that people talked about?
I did not, no, unfortunately.
Yeah, neither did I. Devonte had a huge game, and I think it's kind of clouded what people thought of him coming into the year. Maybe not clouded is the right word. Maybe, changed some thoughts on what he would be coming into the year. I will say that I'm a fan of his. I think that there's a chance he's going to be an All-American this year. In terms of his NBA potential, again, a guy that can really shoot the basketball, both off the dribble and off the catch. Kansas doesn't really put him in a ton of like off-ball actions off of screens, but it seems likely that he's going to be fine shooting off the move, just given the fact that he can shoot off the dribble as well as he can. Defense is a little bit of a worry for me because he's a 6'2" combo guard. Both the guys we talked about previously are more in that 6'5" range with long arms. Graham doesn't really have that physicality. You're going to have to play him with a guy like that. You're going to have to play him with a bigger guy, I think, that can also handle some secondary offensive creation. Where are you at with Devonte Graham in terms of his prospects?
Yeah, the shooting really just jumps off the page, off the catch and off the dribble, catches on the hop. Good rotation, quick release, has that pull-up game, good footwork there as well. Has some deception actually getting to that pull-up with jabs, hesitations. Guys can't just duck under screens. I think he's proficient enough and prolific enough there to make guys respect his shot. Defensively, that's basically where the concerns come down for me. I know he's not going to be a high-level creator, so we're talking about a very specific kind of guy, again, you have to pair him with. He can make basic reads, but he doesn't really get to the rim at all. But then again, he hasn't really been profiled like he will be this year as far as more in the lead guard. Or more, so we'll see what he can do as far as explosion around the basket, how advanced are his reads. The defense is the big concern with me because he just doesn't have much versatility. I mean, his size is going to limit him to a one-position defender, and he just has average tools. And the NBA point guards are getting bigger, so can he really guard these like uber athletes that are 6'4" with longer arms? It's going to be a tough sell there, but I mean, I do feel good about him having an NBA caliber shot. And there is some athletic upside as far as just being a decent functional athlete to, I think he could be a second-round pick.
Yeah, that's more what I think of him as at the moment. The biggest key for me that he needs to show this year is he can create with the ball in his hands consistently with burst, right?
Yeah.
That's something he hasn't shown a lot of in the past. It's something he hasn't got like a crazy chance to show, to be honest. So maybe he can show it this year, be a more consistent threat off the dribble to get into the teeth of the defense and make reads either for his own shot and finishing at the rim or in terms of creating for others off the bounce. I'm going to have him as more of a second-round guy coming into the year, but he's also someone that I think could easily move in to that end of the first-round range depending on how his senior season goes.
That's fair. If he really shows more playmaking, like you said, more burst in pick-and-roll situations, if he can manipulate the defense, kind of get into the teeth of defense on kickouts, drop-offs, all that stuff, I'll think about moving him higher. But I'm more skeptical with him just because of his physical tools.
Yep.
It's going to be a tough sell. He's going to have to be kind of a special playmaker to have a ton of value.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Let's move on to a couple of guys that I'm pretty high on as, potential like sleepers in this class who a lot of people don't necessarily know about. The first one is going to be Kobe McEwen out of Utah State. If I remember correctly, you have not seen a ton of Kobe McEwen, right?
He's the one guy or one of the few guys on this list I've not seen a moment of.
So Kobe McEwen last year averaged, I think, like 14.9 points, 5.1 rebounds, 3.1 assists at Utah State. I think those numbers are right. How I came across him was, I'd heard of him a little bit from NBA scouts that I'd spoken with, like I would say toward February. And then I started to look at his numbers. And when I was doing kind of searches on sportsreference.com or, kind of looking into numbers in the in-depth manner that I do, his name kept popping up. And one of the things where his name popped up was 4 players last year as freshmen averaged 14.5 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists per game last year. 3 of them were Markelle Fultz, Josh Jackson, and Lonzo Ball. The 4th one was Kobe McEwen. So that's pretty good. Anytime you're in company with top 4 picks in the NBA draft, I think that's pretty solid. What he does really, really well right now is that he is a shot maker who can play in some pick and roll. Last year, he was in the 77th percentile in catch and shoot. He was in the 80th percentile in jump shots off the dribble. Finishing around the basket, he was in the 80th percentile last year. Really smart ball handler in the pick and roll, can get into the teeth of the defense, makes plays for himself really, really well. He's a good spot-up player as well. Gets out into transition a decent amount. Where he struggled a little bit last year was creating plays for others. He averaged 3 assists a game, but it was more because he had the ball in his hands a lot. This year, I talked to him at Mountain West Media Day. I talked to Tim Duryea at Mountain West Media Day. The thing that they mentioned about him was that the game has slowed down for him and to expect a bigger leap this year in terms of his playmaking ability. If he makes that playmaking ability leap at 6'4", relative length, not anything crazy from what I know, I think that he can grow into like being a potential first round pick at some point. Like, he is a legit, very real prospect for people to track, I think.
Yeah, I'm excited to see some tape. I mean, it's hard for me to react because I haven't seen any of them, but it's, from what you say, he's at least intriguing.
Yeah, he's not like a hyper athlete necessarily, which I think is maybe the biggest concern for me right now, but he is a smart player who knows how to get to his spots and is a good shot maker both at the rim and from deep, and that's a really good combination to have. The other guy I want to talk about real quick is Tyler Hall. Tyler Hall last year became the second player in the last 25 years to put up 23 points at least per game on a true shooting percentage of 63% or better. That was a sophomore or younger. Since he was the first guy to do it since Stephen Curry, and they're the only two guys to do it in the last 25 years. That's pretty good. He's just a shot maker right now. Like, he plays with the ball in his hands a lot. He can knock down shots off the dribble, knocks down shots off the catch. But just as a true floor spacer, I think he might just have value in that manner. Now, if he can start creating a little bit more within pick and rolls and start getting into the teeth of the defense a little bit more, I think he's someone that could legitimately move up pretty quickly. But I think he still needs to show just a little bit more in terms of what he can do with the ball in his hands.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit of Hall. Gorgeous shooter off the catch and off the bounce. Just the efficiency has been pretty insane with him, and he can really use dribble moves to get to his pull-up. So that's kind of a necessary thing for not really necessarily an undersized player, but someone of his athletic makeup who's not going to do much, I don't think, outside of shooting. You got to be an elite-level shooter, and he has a chance to be that.
So DeAnthony Melton, I think, is the next guy that we should talk about. I just talked for a while about two random guys. DeAnthony Melton, I think, is going to be in my first round, my top 30, whenever I initially release my board. I'll let you talk about DeAnthony Melton, though. What impresses you from what you see of him?
I love Melton. I'm going to have him probably top 25, top 20 even. I'm a really big fan of his. He's probably my second favorite combo behind Bruce Brown in the class, actually, depending on how exactly you define combo. But the thing that sticks out with him is just a super functional athlete. Like, his athleticism trickles into so many parts of his game: shot blocking, steals, anticipation stuff defensively.
Super
really
long, too.
Yeah, really long, good instincts. Plays, again, physical style. We saw him defend Fultz last year as an on-ball defender, showed his ability there. Instinctive off-ball. We saw that in the UCLA game against Lonzo. He rebounds. He's a high-level rebounder. Can play making the pick and roll with pretty decent vision. It just comes down to really the shooting. I mean, he didn't shoot the ball well last year from three. He has a pretty fast release, good rise out of that, and it usually catches on the hop. My issue with him is the elbows out. It's decent foundational mechanics to work with, but not ideal. He has to be able to shoot, catch, and shoot, though. If he does that, I think he's a really, really high-level prospect because he just impacts winning in so many different ways. I don't think he's going to be a league guard in terms of shooting off the dribble, any of that stuff. He can do a secondary pick and roll and make a pass, a skip pass. He reads defenses okay. A lot of his passes came in transition, which isn't the worst thing, but he can at least make reads. The finishing, I don't think is going to be dynamic. He's not that explosive. He has long strides, though, and he is comfortable with his left hand, so those are positives to look for. Lacks that dynamic burst, but again, he compensates with some of that with longer strides. You're just looking at a multi-purpose kind of Swiss Army knife kind of player who can contribute to winning across multiple categories. But really what you want to see this year is if that spike in shooting goes up to, say, like 36, 37%, then you really have something.
Yeah, for me, there are a lot of similarities to what Malcolm Brogdon was when he was younger at Virginia. And the key with Brogdon is that he became a really, really good shooter. If Melton becomes a really, really good shooter, I think that you could see him play a similar role in the NBA even to what Brogdon does now, where he's kind of not like a totally true point guard, but in the right scheme, he can play some point. He runs a lot of off-ball action with how much Giannis handles the ball as well. Melton's really good at all of that and affects winning in multiple ways just because of his length, because of his mobility, because of the way he utilizes athleticism, because of his motor, and because His reaction time is something that really impresses me. He seems to read things just like that split second quicker than what everyone else does on the floor. You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly.
So I really like what I've seen from Melton so far, but the jump shot is going to be the biggest key. It's going to make him either a first-round pick or a second-round pick. Like, I think he's a draft-worthy prospect now, but that's the key to his game. He needs to be able to shoot the basketball for the rest of his offensive profile to really function in an NBA game, I think.
Yeah, I'm really hoping he does. He's one of the big swing players for me in the class, that specific skill. If he can do that, he just does too much well on the court to not be some kind of maybe a minorly impactful prospect, but he'll be something. He just does too many things well to be nothing if he can shoot the ball. I'm not sure. I like the Brogdon comparison. I'm not sure if I'm nearly as confident in that, just because Brogdon had a lot of off-ball, off-screen usage in his college days, so he showed that ability on really high volume. And Melton, just for me, seems like a straight catch-and-shoot guy. Maybe I haven't watched enough of the footwork, but I don't really feel comfortable with him off movement yet. But again, he doesn't really need to. I mean, that obviously helps, especially in modern-day motion offenses. If you can have a guard that can come off a screen quickly and elevate, that's really, really valuable. I'm not sure if I see Melton getting there, but it's possible. And really all he needs to do, if he can hit a corner three, if he can be a threat from there, that's going to be really valuable.
Well, the key with Brogdon, too, and it's a standard that I don't really think you can hold any prospect to, Brogdon is like elite of the elite in terms of character and in terms of work ethic and in terms of like all of the other intangible stuff, and it's hard to really hold prospects to that standard. Let's talk about Grayson Allen. Do you like Grayson Allen at all for the NBA?
I don't know. Again,
Grayson's the kind of guy that I can see you hating.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely where I lean towards. I don't know if I'd go as strongly as hate, but I am very skeptical, I would say. He's the kind of guy, we talked about him, comparing and contrasting him with Kennard, who's got a much better floor game as far as handling, pull-up shooting, the craft. You're talking with Grayson, he's going to drive a lot of his value in the NBA if he has value via his shooting. Yep. I'm not sure how much of the rest of it really translates to an impactful level. So I do think he's going to get drafted, and I think he can be okay situationally as a slasher. He's looked okay in those situations. I'm not sure how much of it is going to be real or not, as far as actually being a plus value. I just look at him as like he's a shooter first, and then he has some skill level for sure. He has some slashing ability. Is he going to defend anybody, though? That's really what I want to know.
No, I don't think he's really going to defend anybody. I'll say that now. What I will say is that I do think the jump shot is really going to translate, because it's a very simple jump shot. Like, there's no dip off of catches, and that's going to force teams to close out on him pretty hard. And the fact that he's a very fluid athlete who also actually possesses a pretty decent amount of explosiveness, I think is really going to help him play off of that jump shot. I think that that's where the rest of his skill set comes in. He's not necessarily as polished as a ball handler as Luke Kennard, but he's a more athletic player than Luke Kennard. And I think that in spot-up situations particularly, it's going to be a little bit easier for him to create space and to get separation from defense because of that athleticism.
It's interesting. I just don't know how valuable do you think a player like that is in the modern game if you can't play both sides of the court and you're basically a shooter who can attack closeouts. I mean, do you see him being like a gravitational threat off screens like Kennard was? Because Kennard was awesome at that. Like, that was a big part of his game.
Tough.
So, like, that's what I'm getting at. Like, I totally agree with you about the spot shooting, attacking closeouts. I think he has that kind of fluid athleticism to get to the basket at times and finish even. It's just a harder sell when there's the ancillary skills for him aren't there. But that's probably why he's in the second round discussion instead of the first round discussion for I think most people.
Yeah, like, I'm not going to have him in my first round whenever I do like a big board. But I am going to have him drafted. I think that skill set offensively is useful. Let's talk about your guy, Andrew Jones. You're a little bit higher on Andrew Jones than I am.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious with him. It's more like curiosity. You can see the upside, but it wasn't there. I'm glad he went back to school. I'll say that. I was gonna buy him just because I didn't really like the depth too much in the previous draft when you got past like 15, 16. But I'm glad he went back to school. So you have to start with the athleticism. I mean, he's dynamic burst in the open floor, especially. I think he's got a pretty good start-stop athleticism with his first step. Vertically explosive. He's not anything like Dennis Smith, but he has enough pop to rise off one and finish quickly. Workable mechanics on his shot. A little bit of a lower release on his set shot, but he shoots well from the foul line, and he showed promise last year shooting off the bounce, maybe even creating a little bit of space on step backs. And it seems kind of capable in a secondary pick and roll setting. I don't think he has much lead guard equity, frankly. I just don't really trust his IQ, his ability to read the floor yet. I mean, if he shows that this year, I think he becomes much more interesting because I do like his
playing
defense.
Off the ball this year. So
yeah, with Matt Coleman, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, if he gets any kind of chance to show, I mean, I guess it would be in a secondary sense, but that's something I'll look for as far as pick and roll play, even against a bent defense. I like his point of attack defense, outstanding quickness, and he has that. He's not like the strongest player yet, but he's got a good frame. So I like that quick twitch athleticism in that capacity. So if you combine that kind of point of attack defense with the ability to shoot a little bit, maybe provide some secondary creation, I think he could be something. But I don't know if I see the IQ level. I don't know how you feel about his IQ. I'm guessing it's not very highly.
Defensive IQ, I like. I agree with you. I think he's a pretty good point of attack defender. I think that he even shows some potential to be a relatively switchable, like 1 through 3 defender if he can put on a little bit more weight. I think that could have value. I don't know what his value is offensively. Like I just don't know. Like I don't. He has to shoot it to have value offensively to me. Like otherwise, what role does he play if he can't shoot it? I guess like he definitely can't be a lead guard. And if he's not a lead guard and you're going to play him off the ball, I mean, like, do you want to have a secondary creator out there? Maybe if you played him next to a guy like a Stephen Curry as a secondary creator where, like, he could just attack into the open space on the floor and, kind of work it that way. I just don't think there are a lot of holes for a guy like that, like a lot of spots where that works,
Yeah, I wonder if he could play a backup lead guard role in a very specific kind of spread pick and roll system. Yeah. I wonder if he's capable enough to do that. That would give him increased value if he could play on the ball more and you could actually utilize that athleticism. I'm not sold on that. I got to go back and watch more of his film to get a better sense of the instincts, the pick and roll reads. He seemed to get sped up a lot last year, but he is, again, wasn't he like an undersized 2 mostly in high school and then he transferred and played a little bit more 1 last year? So he's not really a natural point guard, correct?
I know that he was definitely a little bit more of a scorer in high school. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
But like even, I guess that like the other thing is too like, so he's a slasher kind of who's going to be a secondary creator who can't shoot yet and doesn't finish at the rim. Like,
I mean, I'm a little higher on his shooting. I don't think he's like a non-shooter. He looked okay when he had time and space off the catch, and again, he shot pretty well off the dribble last year. I mean, it was a smaller.
Actually in the 94th percentile last year and 55 shots off the dribble. So
not a huge sample, but decent.
Yeah. So he was good last year off the dribble, but I don't know. Like I don't like the shot though.
Is it too low, or just what do you think?
It's too low, and maybe it's that he takes. I don't like his balance, but maybe it's because he takes too many off-balance shots. Like maybe it's a thing where he can fix it just by shot selection, but like I don't like the balance. It's a weird deal.
That's fair. I think there's definitely issues. I don't have him as high as some other people do because of these holdbacks. It's harder to find a position for him in the NBA if he can't be a lead guard. I totally agree with that.
Let's go from him to one of the absolute elite shooters in all of college basketball. Marcus Howard is one of the most interesting prospects to me in college basketball, I would say, really. So I don't know how much you know about Howard, but he was a reclassification to the class of 2017. He turns 19 in the middle of March next year, I think it is. Like he's going to be 18 basically this entire year after playing basically all of last year at 17 years old. And Marcus Howard was probably the best shooter in college basketball last year. He shot just an absurd, I'm pulling up the numbers right now, 54.7% from 3 on 150 attempts. The passing wasn't terrific. He was like 2.3 assists per game. Not necessarily a great thing, but he's a pure shot maker. Like that's what he does. He just knocks down shots better than anybody at that age that I can really remember. 99th percentile off the dribble, 100th percentile off the catch. Like this guy is just a shot maker. I don't know what to do with him in terms of anything else, but there has to be value there at that age, right?
I mean, if you're a diverse shot maker, there is some value, especially late in the draft when there aren't a lot of other NBA skill sets, because you don't ever find 60 guys usually in the draft who are NBA players. At a certain point, you usually have a cutoff where it's like, who has an NBA skill? So Marcus Howard, yeah, he's an elite level shooter, both off the dribble and off the catch. You can do something with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's really all I've got. Like, he needs to really round out the rest of his game. Like, the first thing would be either becoming a defender or becoming a distributor in some way. But he's a guy worth keeping an eye on that, again, advanced analytics systems are going to love because he produced at such a young age last year. In terms of a couple other guys, let's talk about a couple of freshmen. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is someone that I've talked about for a while, that Daniel LaRue has talked about for a while, that good friend of the program, Mike Schmitz, has talked about for a while. Kind of a combo-y guard at 6'5". I think he has like a 6'10" wingspan. Shoots it both off the catch and off the bounce. Really, really good passer as well. More combo-y than really a true point, though. So how much of him have you seen? I know you were at Adidas Nations 2 years ago when he was there, or maybe a year and a half ago when he was there. But what are your overall thoughts of him?
Yeah, I've seen him at Hoop Summit, too. I've seen actually a fair amount of him in person, and his skill level just really pops when you see these guys in person. They're doing the drills. Any kind of shooting drill, handling drills, he always looks the best, especially on the international squad. He's just phenomenally skilled in that kind of setting. He's got those one-handed skip passes and pick and roll when they're playing 5-on-5, like shell drills and stuff like that, naturally changing directions. He's not a dynamic athlete, but I think he's going to have to win with craft and skill. Really great ambidexterity as a finisher. I think that might be the most underrated part of his game, is he can really finish with his left hand. It's just, for me, he just looks so diminutive in person. Like, his size.
He's very skinny.
Yeah, so he's listed at 180 pounds. He even looks skinnier than that, frankly. And it's hard to see him playing like the 2 in the NBA. I know he has decent height, but it just doesn't look like he has the lower body, the frame to really battle with NBA caliber players. I really, really like him, though. In some video I've seen of him, he's come off a screen like 30 feet from the basket and knocked down a shot on the move, squaring up really quickly. So really skilled. I like his intellect. He seems like a great kid from everybody I've talked to. It's just the positional fit's a little tougher because of his kind of frame and physical tools.
Yeah, and like, if the frame comes around at all, I think he's a first-round pick. He plays really hard defensively, too. Like, he has all of the skills and all of the, random body control and ambidexterity and length and height and motor that you're looking for. He really needs the frame. He really just needs the frame to come along. He needs to get up to like 200 pounds at some point in the next 2 to 3 years. If that comes, I think he's a first-round pick. Like, I think he's really good. I think he's just so gifted that he can be.
Me too.
Like, he can be that kind of perfect 3-and-D wing that can also create a little bit.
Yeah, I totally agree with all that. He really just has one limiting factor. The skill set's there. I think the IQ is there. The competitive desire is there. It just comes down to, can he add enough girth to compete with NBA caliber athletes? That's going to be the entire question for him.
And, another guy like that is Shai Alexander at Kentucky. You talk to people around the NBA. They're very excited about what they've seen from him so far. Long guard. I think he's like 6'6" now with a 7-foot wingspan. Knocks down shots from deep. Really good passer. From what I've seen, the ball handling ability isn't amazing. It's good. It's not incredible or anything, but I think that he can continue to develop there. And if he's going to be more of a secondary creator, that's often the kind of primary differentiator between those two positions, right? If you can be a primary creator, you tend to have just ridiculous ball handling ability and the ability to create separation consistently. I think that might hold him back just a slight amount, but he's athletic, he's long, he's a shot maker. Generally, he also defends reasonably well from what I've seen too.
Yeah, he also impressed the Hoop Summit just up close. Really good attitude in drills and everything like that. I know that might not resonate with a lot of people, but that's a lot of the NBA folks are talking about that.
Resonates shooting NBA draft, NBA scouts.
For sure, yeah. So shooting drills, he looked better than I thought he would, honestly. He could shoot a little bit off movement. I didn't see a ton off the dribble from him that would lead you to believe that's going to become a dynamic part of his game. And the rest of his game, I just echo what you said. The passing IQ, he seems like a heady player. He can make reads. It's just I don't see that dynamic, self-creation, handle like lead guard stuff. But as like a combo guard guy who's a high IQ, has the positional size, the length, and the two-way potential ability, I think he's definitely someone to monitor.
Yeah, I would again say for him, I think he is a potential first-round pick down the road.
That's fair.
Just full stop. Like I think he can get there. Cole, we're running out of time here, man. But I just want to mention Terrence Davis real quick. I know you've watched a bunch of Terrence Davis. Go on ahead.
I've watched a little bit, yeah. I mean, his diverse shot making, really, his upside stands out there. He hasn't been that efficient, but when you watch him utilized on the offense, he can shoot off pin downs, floppy actions, pull up situations, and it looks projectable to an NBA setting. Just he's not like a dynamic athlete. He's a pretty good one. He's not a high level one though. But just the shot making upside is there. It looks like an above average athlete in space, good frame. I didn't see much creation from him outside of like maybe a dribble pull up or some straight line slashes. I didn't see a lot of, changing speeds, the handle, decent explosion. We'll see. He really excels on like the go and catch, as they call it. Like he starts moving right when he catches the ball, and that gives him like a little bit of an extra head of steam. Yeah. So that's something to look for. I'm looking for really his handle and his shiftiness this year, and like his passing IQ and decision making. How good is that? How much have you seen of him?
I've seen a pretty decent amount. I actually do like the creation ability. I think that he's pretty good with the ball in his hands. He is good at slashing to the basket. I'm trying to pull up numbers right now, and for whatever reason, Synergy is failing me. But I like the fact that he finishes well inside. He is tough, man. That kid just absorbs contact like nobody's business. Like people, I don't even know that people bounce off of him, but like he just absorbs it and uses it, not to his advantage necessarily, but it doesn't affect him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great point. I had that in my notes as well. And he has good touch, it seems like. I know he was ultra efficient finishing, but it seemed like when I was watching some of the clips, probably got through 20 or so, and most of them were of the straight line variety, like attacking a closeout in a straight line. Mm-hmm. He can absorb contact for sure. He can even finish with his left with touch. So, I mean, there's definitely a really projectable skill set to work with there.
Yeah. Overall, I think he's a guy to watch more than like a surefire draft pick. But junior, he has a couple years to kind of figure some things out. Really needs to become more of a passer. I think he's 6'4", long arms, but he's going to have to play as more of like a lead guard unless the jump shot comes around, or more of like a combo-y guard who has the ball in his hands a little bit more unless the jump shot comes around, and I don't know how I feel about that necessarily.
That's fair. Can I get one guy in really quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Kamar Baldwin.
I knew you were going there.
So I'll just say what I see on film. I haven't watched a ton of him, just enough to have a decent conception. Advanced quickness. I like his pull-up game. He's got good metrics last year. He's got a high release, shoots out, not up, so he can really shoot over some contests. I was really impressed with some of the guys he shot over last year. His point of attack defense, again, upside-wise, ultra quick. He lacks some girth, but he kind of makes it up with competitiveness, not super strong. The issue is mostly, again, the size, 6 foot, 170 pounds. Apparently has some length. I don't know what his wingspan measurement is, but it doesn't seem super, super long, but it seems decent enough to be somewhat projectable. And he's really not a creator for others at this juncture. Very raw in pick and roll as a playmaker. His handle isn't great. So he's more of like a straight Patrick Beverly type if you're going to like profile him. I'm not saying they're identical, but that's conceptually the kind of player he would be utilized as at the next level. Just someone to keep an eye on. If the playmaking increases at all, he could be kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I would also mention Malik Newman. I'm excited just to see him in general at Kansas. Been a shot maker throughout his career, obviously a top 10 prospect coming into college. Went to Mississippi State. Wasn't all that great there in that scheme. I think Kansas is probably a little bit better of a fit for him. Ultimately, at the end of the day, though, the key for me with him is burst. He needs to show consistent bursts to get separation from defenders. Yeah,
and I think he gets pushed under the rug a little bit just because of that transition to Kansas. But he really does on film. He has really, really awesome film of being a shooter, like a spot-up shooter, off the dribble stuff. He has advanced acumen in that area. I think that he does have some NBA appeal. Gets some Monte Ellis comparisons. I'm not sure I see that at the basket as a finisher, especially. And Monte had great burst. So I don't know if that necessarily holds up. But he does have good film as well of being a decent point of attack defender, being able to stick with some lead guards, especially in international play. So I'm looking for handle with him. How well can he probe, make pick and roll reads? He's really, really average as far as IQ from what I've seen. He doesn't do a lot of like skip passes or anything. He's more of a score first guy. So that's just something to look for. If he shows any of that acumen at Kansas. He could be something, and he's going to be a shooter, I think. He's got awesome mechanics. I really do think he profiles well there.
Yep. And then one more name, Kyrie Thomas at Creighton, one of the best on-ball defenders in the country. Kind of working along as a shooter still, kind of working along as a creator. If the offense comes along this year, I think he's a very sneaky NBA prospect because teams are always looking for on-ball defenders that are long and tough and physical and kind of willing to do what it takes. Two freshmen, Jalen Felton and Paul Scruggs. Scruggs is a little bit more of a tough guy, 6'3", 6'9" wingspan, absorbs contact well inside, gets into the paint consistently. Jalen Felton, a little bit more of a, he's kind of a little bit more like what Ray Felton was in college, a guy that, bursted out in transition and, can get into the teeth of the defense using his quickness and his handle. Two guys to watch at least as combo guards this year.
Yeah, that about wraps it up for me, man. I think, did we hit on Trae Young really quick? That can be a quick one. I mean, he's just a dynamic off-the-dribble shooter with really, really deep range, yes. And he's going to play in a system that's going to really allow him to shoot those. I don't know what he is an NBA prospect, but he's another guy to, again, keep on the radar.
Yeah, for sure. Trae Young is a hell of a shooter, and that's about all I got to say about him. Cole, tell the people where they can find your work.
So we are going to launch The Stepien over at thestepien.com in about 2 weeks' time. So right before college season starts, so you'll be able to find my work consistently over there. Right now, again, pretty much all my draft content is coming via my Twitter feed and this podcast. So as Sam would say, stay locked into that for now, and I'll provide updates as we get closer to launch date.
For sure. So as always, go to theathletic.com. We're putting out a lot of really great content. What else? Follow this podcast. Follow all of the other great podcasts at clnsmedia.com. Great stuff over there. I am very thankful to Nick for bringing me into the fold. That's about all I got for you guys today. Until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.